for inconvenience, Sama. We are going to start the live stream. Thank you for joining us today. For everyone, this is Sama. She's a psychiatrist and psychotherapist from Palestine. If you could present yourself.
Well, thank you very much for this kind invitation. And especially because it comes at a difficult time in Palestine. You know, Palestinians have been struggling for ending the occupation and for liberation for so many years so far. And there has been a serious escalation since the beginning of the second week of October, on the 7th of October. And there has been a retaliatory escalation and a genocide by Israelis. Massive numbers of Palestinians are being killed, and currently, when we are speaking, we lost internet connection with Gaza. There is no electricity, which makes the situation more serious there. So this is just an introduction to pave the way for what I will be speaking about. So today I will be talking to you about the resilience amidst adversity, navigating mental health in occupied Palestine. We can think of resilience at any time in Palestine, but now it's a time of war, which makes the situation exceptional. I don't know if someone will be doing translation, or is everybody with us today English speaking?
No, we're just going to let you speak, to listen to you, and then we translate the questions.
Okay. So it will be possible to follow the English. It's an English, there will be no translation, yeah?
Yeah, and no translation, only for the questions.
Okay, that's fine. So let me explain the situation in Palestine. Before this aggravation of atrocity, there was an important study made by the World Bank that concluded that 70% of people in Gaza and 50% of people in the West Bank suffer from depression. Another interesting report was published by Save the Children last year. They concluded that 80% of people in Gaza, of children in Gaza, suffer from depression. You know, Gaza has been under 16-year siege, blockade, where the people of Gaza cannot get out of Gaza at all. And there has been multiple attacks. And of course, this has been a very traumatic situation for people, especially the young ones in Gaza. A third example is the death of this activist. His name is Khadr Adnan. He died in May in his cell in prison. He was on hunger strike and he was left without medical attention. When he died, an Israeli journalist, Eddie Cohen, described his death, which resulted from medical neglect and oppression, as suicide. In these three examples, the high statistics on depression and psychopathology in Palestine, and calling a resistance that ends with death as suicide, we see that the political power pathologizes Palestinians very easily. In reaction to this, our mental health response is the critical appraisal.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
yes.
Mini question. Are you moving slides of the PowerPoint or something? We are watching only the first slide.
So we'll stop and reshare. I don't know what's wrong with this. Do you see my slides now?
Yeah, but you are changing the slides, or you were okay? Like that is perfect.
Okay, so let me see if I make it like that. So, do you see them moving now?
Yes, we see
Okay.
the third slide.
So, the first slide is about the World Bank report that the depression in Gaza is 70%. And the second one from Save the Children. Do you see the second one? Do you see the slide or not?
Yes, we're seeing the slides.
Okay. So it's moving. The slides are going on naturally, right? So anyway, in our response to this pathologization of the Palestinians' experience is a critical appraisal of the data and helping to transform the psychological suffering and helplessness and agitation into a useful action for self and collective liberation. So when I say the critical appraisal of data, I want to give an example about the study by the World Bank. This study used the WHO, the World Health Organization questionnaire, WHO 5 questions about well-being. So if you go to people who have been living under bombardment and ask them how about their activity, about their sleep, about their well-being, of course, the answers will be negative. But we cannot make a conclusion out of this that these people suffer from depression, because it's more likely that they suffer from the violation of human rights and from the political distress that is surrounding them. To understand this data, we need to understand the context. I need confirmation that you see the slides. Do you see the map?
We're seeing the third one, the 80% Gaza children.
So you're not seeing my slides. Okay. I'll reshare.
Yeah, try to put it full screen again.
Now you see it?
Yeah, now we can see. Maybe what we can do is that when you change the slide,
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit of work, but to show again the presentation.
You see the slides? You see them moving? Did the image change?
Yeah, like that is perfect. We see them moving.
Okay. They're moving. So you see the map now, right?
Yes, we see them moving. Like that is perfect.
Okay. So the map explains the context. The context of occupation means land theft and geographical fragmentation. Land theft, where we see the land of Palestine shrinking, and now the Palestinians live on no more than 7 to 8% of the historical land of Palestine. And as you see, the green areas here, this little area is Gaza Strip, where 2.3 million people are living now, and where food insecurity is very high, unemployment and poverty rate are very high. And this is the West Bank. And we see also in the West Bank that villages and towns are separated from each other by Israeli settlements, illegal settlements, according to international law. So this political reality and land theft creates different socio-political determinants of health and mental health in Palestine. They affect the mental health of the Palestinians in so many ways. You see here another map that shows the difference between that there is no continuity between Gaza and the West Bank. So, of course, call it whatever you want, military occupations, settler colonialism, or apartheid. Military occupation creates and sustains and contributes to health and mental health disparities, whether directly by causing death and injuries and detention, or indirectly by impairing growth, development, and hindering the efforts to create a health system within the Palestinian territories. Gaza is a highly dense place. It's a very small area with a highly dense, highly populated community. We see in the West Bank, there is a very high level of repression where an adolescent who is provoked by the situation and confronts the occupation, he will be arrested by a troop of soldiers. And his treatment will be so cruel that to the point to traumatize him deliberately so that he will not dare to repeat any confrontation in the future. This is the kind of damage that we see in Gaza these days. And this damage is also deliberately designed to break the hopes and the aspiration for liberation for the people of Gaza. So for any kind of, any effort to challenge the occupation, there will be a very severe reaction. The life of Palestinians have been an experiment, a big experiment of conditioning the Palestinian people, conditioning them to helplessness. So whenever they dare to protest against the occupation, there will be a very cruel punishment that makes people surrender and take a resignation position. This image comes from Jerusalem. As I explained, there is geographical discontinuity and the challenges in each geographical area is different. In Jerusalem, there is more confrontation, more contact between Israelis and Palestinians. And this comes from the famous Damascus gates in the old city of Jerusalem. Every guy who passes by will be checked in this humiliating way in front of everybody in the street. And this way is very demasculinizing and insulting. Also, the international community that supports Israeli media creates negative representation of Palestinians. They portray Palestinians as people who have a culture of death and hatred. And they care less about the culture of their children and the protection of life for their children. And they show images of Palestinian kids playing the martyr, where they are paramedics holding a martyr, someone who's killed in events. But it is understandable that Palestinian kids play this kind of game because this is the reality. This is the thing that they see all the time. And they express this, they reenact the traumatic events that they see around them. Even when, even sometimes Israeli spokespeople, they try to play on the cultural sensitivity and gender sensitivity within the Palestinian community. So, for example, this comes from the Facebook page of the Israeli army spokesperson. He says that a woman who participates in the March of Return, in the demonstrations, lacks honor and femininity. And he says other things to provoke a negative attitude from the Palestinian community against this woman. I want to tell you that people like myself living in Jerusalem, Jerusalem is where my parents and grandparents were born and lived all through their life. And I was born here and lived all through my life here. But in our identity papers, it is written that our nationality is undefined. We are citizens of nowhere in the world. We are perceived by the state of Israel as temporary residents, which makes our status very vulnerable. We can be, this residency can be revoked at any time if we don't abide by Israeli laws. And these Israeli laws are very repressive. They can haunt people for their opinion and for their feelings. We see over time, they changed the phrase that nationality is undefined and they make it Jordanian, which has no foundation at all, because for the Jordanians, I'm not a Jordanian at all. There is also an attack on the memory and a complete deletion of the Palestinian narrative. You know, it's the powerful who writes the history and who creates the narrative. In 2019, there was a big event in Jerusalem for Israelis, where world leaders, 70 world leaders, came for the commemoration of the Holocaust and visited the Holocaust Museum. None of them knows that this museum is built on the ruins of a Palestinian village that was evacuated by military force. So there is, at the same time, when there is hyper amnesia for the history of Israelis, there is denial, complete denial and neglect of the Palestinian experience and Palestinian history. This is a medical report, and this medical report describes a woman whose home was demolished, a woman in Jerusalem. Her home was demolished, and of course she was crying. She started hyperventilating and gasping for air, and then she lost consciousness, and she was taken to an Israeli hospital at the emergency room. And her diagnosis was emotionally unstable personality and malingering. Again, the diagnosis was used here without any reference to the context and to the situation that created her reaction. This is another example of many Western reports that say that describe the Palestinian resistance as suicidal acts. And in this article, I make a differentiation between sacrifice in the mindset of a Palestinian and the suicidal acts. And let me show you, respected audience, one of the ironic things. You know, the occupation of the land of Palestine was created by massacres, like Jewish militias at that time in 47, 48, used to attack one village and kill many people, and then everyone will be frightened and leave. This is what they are trying to do now in Gaza. So one of the famous historical massacres that were created in the past lies in the village of Deir Yassin. Every Palestinian knows very well the history of Deir Yassin. 300 people were killed on one day in a very small village, and the son of the baker was put in the fire of bakery. So it was very horrifying. And this was terrifying for the villages around it, and people were displaced by force and by crime from their village. Now, this place, Deir Yassin village, is the place where the psychiatric hospital is built. If a Palestinian from Jerusalem becomes psychotic or suicidal, he will be admitted to this hospital, which is located in the place of massacre. So that's the situation. We are working in this situation where the context is very pathological, and instead of saying that the context is pathogenic, we are saying that people have pathology and people have depression. So how can we function? I am the director of all mental health services in the West Bank, and I'm also a collaborator with my colleagues in Gaza, mental health services. I supervise also mental health services with my colleagues in Gaza. And this is the description of the services that we have. In Palestine, we have created community mental health system. We have 14 centers in 14 districts. We have one psychiatric hospital, which used to be an ancient hospital serving Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. And we have a rehab center for drug addiction. In Gaza, we have 6 community mental health centers and 1 psychiatric hospital. I learned from my colleagues a few days ago that the psychiatric hospital in Gaza was also bombarded. We have several NGOs and UN services that also provide mental health clinics and mental health services. If we compare the number of professionals in mental health in the West Bank and Gaza to those in Lebanon and Jordan, we see that we are very understaffed. Even, I don't compare to Britain or France, I compare it to the region, to other low and middle income countries. But nevertheless, we see that the numbers are very low. And we have many challenges. Of course, we have a high prevalence of mental health disorders. This doesn't mean, I don't agree with the statistics by the World Bank, but a more serious study that was published in 2019 suggests that the prevalence is 22.1% of Palestinians need specialized mental health interventions. Another challenge is that NGOs use the biomedical model. And this biomedical model does not account for human rights violation and for the social and political determinants of health. And it does not suggest that the advocacy of human rights is very necessary for the well-being and for the mental health of Palestinians. So it treats the psychopathology of people as an individual problem. It does not provide community solutions for the collective trauma and for the collective loss and grief that results from war and violence. And there are many NGOs that function in Palestine, and these NGOs exhibit a misunderstanding of the meaning of neutrality and impartiality because they understand it as a veto for mentioning the political reality in Palestine. They want us to only give an ICD code for anyone who is sick and treat this person. If the person suffers from injustice or detention or torture or grief and is not sick, we cannot admit him to that NGO to receive the necessary psychological support. Usually, they say that Palestinians suffer from PTSD, and I have argued repeatedly that there is no P in the Palestinian experience. There is no post. Trauma is enduring, repetitive, collective, historical, and transgenerational, passing from one generation to another. It does not look at all like the experience of an American soldier who goes to Iraq, and when he goes back to the United States, the flashbacks and the threat is imaginary for him. In Palestine, the threat is very serious, and the hypervigilance is necessary to survive the atrocities. Also, sometimes I hear from my patients that they say something like, I know what I have, I'm insightful. They say in Arabic, if any one of you is Arabic speaking, they say, العين بصيرة والإيد قصيرة, which means that I have the insight, but my arm is short. Like I play the idiot, I play the sick, because if I become opinionated and critical of the situation, this will harm my security. Now in Palestine, during this, like in the West Bank and Jerusalem, people cannot talk about their feelings regarding what's taking place in Gaza, because your feelings will be criminalized. Your thoughts will take you to detention. So people act as if nothing is taking place, or they make themselves like idiots. Okay, we don't have an opinion about what's taking place. There is pervasive mistrust. And of course, there is pervasive mistrust because Israeli military exports spying software to the international community and maybe even to your country. And it trains many other governments on repressing their own people. So I see patients in my clinic who have a problem. They don't want their name to be registered on my computer. They want my telephone and my computer to be out of the setting of the therapeutic room. And those people are not paranoid and they don't have schizophrenia. Their hypervigilance is rational given the difficult and repressive circumstances. So in the midst of this situation where everything around us wants the Palestinians to completely surrender to repression, mental health workers see that resistance to the occupation is an essential element in the recovery of the occupied mind. Because we understand that an individual trauma, a trauma of a car accident, for example, or rape, it changes your nervous system and it changes the circuits in your brain. It damages your brain tissue in a way or another. While the collective trauma, historical trauma, colonial trauma, it damages the social fabric and how people relate to each other. It does a lot of harm to the connections between people, to the collective self-image of an oppressed community, and to our relationship with other nations. It damages the fabric of the society, of the Palestinian society. And what symptoms do we see because of this collective trauma? We see a sense of internalized oppression. We see Palestinians who, in the absence of resistance, if they surrender, they see themselves inferior to their aggressors. Even worse, they might be fascinated with the aggressor. Mistrust, prevalent mistrust throughout the community, low collective self-esteem and confidence, loss of subjectivity, and feeling that they are objectified, loss of agency, and acceptance to the passive victimhood. In that sense, the Palestinian resistance, and here I talk about a wide spectrum of resistance by the word, resistance by action, resistance by nonviolent resistance, by rallies and sit-ins and demonstrations, advocacy, humanitarian work. resistance is a very widespread, and it is up to Palestinians to decide which resistance they can choose at what time and who is capable of doing what. But the resistance position is a healthier one than the passive resignation. Resistance stems from moral position and psychological factors. It represents symbolic and spiritual values that are very important for those who are deprived of tangible rights. It is a humanizing experience. It has a humanizing influence, acting against the dynamic of objectification at both an individual level and at a collective level. It is perceived by Palestinians as a human right guaranteed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and also as a moral duty. It does not subscribe to the usual calculation of risks and benefits that characterize business or economic logic. It cannot be judged merely by the achievement of end results. The journey of resistance is dignifying in itself, even in the absence of the achievement of the desired goals. It maintains a positive conception of an imagined future. We need to imagine a positive future because this keeps us going, looking forward. Otherwise, if we lose this imagination of a better future and we look at all the demolition and loss and devastation around us, we will lose our humanity and our objectivity. We will lose ourselves. We will become unhealthy. In reaction to the Palestinian resistance, what do we expect? What would help us? Don't teach us trauma-focused CBT or narrative therapy or EMDR. It is irrelevant at this point. Psychological first aid is irrelevant when people don't have water, electricity, internet, clean toilets, when infectious diseases are spreading in the UN schools where the displaced people are waiting in thousands. Psychological first aid is not possible. What we expect from people is international solidarity. It is therapeutic, I claim. It validates the humanity of Palestinians. It acknowledges our feelings and our subjectivity, and it supports our aspiration to be agents and actors of change. And it has the potential to generalize to mutual and global activism for justice. Finally, respected audience, I want to leave you with this beautiful image. This is this icon, this symbol, the symbol of the olive tree, is the icon for the Palestine Global Mental Health Network, a group of mental health activists who try to bring the decolonial aspect, the liberation aspect of psychology into our practice, into our theory and practice. And we are supported by several other organizations in the West, including the most active one of them are the UK Palestine Mental Health Network, then the USA Palestine Mental Health Network, and there is another one in Ireland, which is pretty active. This solidarity from mental health professionals can help us testify for the difficult situation in Palestine, and it gives us solidarity, resilience, and steadfastness in this difficult time. And it helps us to challenge the power dynamics, even in our profession. I want to remind you that at the beginning of this attack, the American Psychiatric Association and several other mental health associations, especially in the United States, they issued statements of support for Israel, and they referred to Palestinians as terrorists and anti-Semites. And in this way, they gave the green light for Israel to do its genocide against Palestinians without any call for restraint. Mental health professionals need to challenge this attitude, which is contributing, it does not abide by the basic ethics and principles of mental health or health, which the basic premise is do no harm. And I think they are doing a lot of harm for Palestinians. Thank you very much for listening.
So, first of all, thank you very much for your time, for the information. It was very interesting for all of us. And now we're going to have like a time for questions. So if someone has a question, he or she is going to put it, that person, sorry, is going to put it in the comments. And we translate the questions, okay?
Sure.
Todos los que tengan preguntas, las pueden dejar por escrito y las traducimos acá. O comentarios también. I said that not only questions, but if someone has like a commentary or something, is also valid. So I don't know if you can read the chat, but someone asked if it's viable to create an state, or is that possible for an state to exist that represent both cultures at the same time?
You know, this is a political question, but I'm happy to answer it. I think that international law talks about the two-state solution, but Israel created a fait accompli on the ground that doesn't make this solution viable. In reaction to that, Palestinians call for a state for all its citizens, similar to post-apartheid South Africa, where Israelis who stop the occupation will be equal residents to Palestinians. But now, most urgently, is to call for ending the genocide. That's the most urgent thing, stopping the carnage in Gaza. To give you an idea, since the 7th of October, it's been 19 days, 20 days, more than 7,000 people were killed. 3,000 of them are children, 2,000 of them are women. Gaza has been deprived of food, water, electricity, and fuel. 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza, they don't receive any prenatal care. There are 5,000 pregnant women who are about to deliver, but the hospitals are dysfunctional and overwhelmed. There is no anesthesia. There is no basic medical equipment. Some of these women need cesarean section. So can you imagine the disaster, the health disaster? This can be simply called genocide, collective punishment, and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Israelis are open about their intention to expel the people of Gaza outside the Palestinian land and to take over Gaza again. This has to stop. This is most urgent now. And then we can talk about the one-state solution or the two-state solution.
Why I'm still for the next question, someone said that your work is admirable, and thank you a lot for sharing with us. And with the second question, someone asked could you explain the difference between pathogenic and pathological, and how this affects the perception about the Palestine crisis?
Oh, what I mean by pathogenic is the situation that creates the pathology. That's why I say the context, the occupation, the atrocities, war, the collective punishment are pathogenic. They create a pathological reaction. They create illness and suffering and distress. Pathological can be the reaction of people. But what I want to say, in Palestine, all this distress and suffering is not necessarily pathological. Yes, there are certain people with schizophrenia, depression, who need to be treated. But the pain, the overwhelming pain of the majority of people of Palestine is the normal reaction to the abnormal situation, to the pathogenic situation. So this does not need to be treated. I cannot give antidepressant for a woman grieving the traumatic death of her son. Or a person who lost his home to demolition. These people need solidarity, advocacy, restoration of human rights, of basic needs. They don't need medication or specialized psychological interventions. They need basic needs. Now in Gaza, people need water to drink, healthy water to drink. They need food. They need security. They need a safe place. Those are the very basic things that will make many of them better, much better psychologically.
Okay, so we have like a lot of commentaries here, mostly supporting you, but someone had other question that it was if you could explain us like a little bit deeper the impact of Palestinians' children in their development, okay, the impact of the situation in their development.
Oh, yes, sure. Well, first of all, I want to say that Palestinian children are a big percentage of the Palestinian community. The Palestinian community is a very young community. They are almost 50% of the people in Gaza, and they are like 44% of the people in the West Bank. Now, because they are at a developmental stage, their brains are very susceptible and vulnerable. They can be affected by trauma more heavily than adults, than grown-ups whose development has been completed. So also children have weaker defense mechanisms than those of adults. That's why they are most affected by atrocities. You can imagine that when there is continuous fear, people moving from their homes from one place to another, trying to flee from death all the time, you can imagine how stressful this will be for children. I have seen images of children who continue to close their ears even when bombardment finishes. People who come out of the rubble shocked completely, shivering. They regress, they cling to their parents, they suffer from sleeplessness, agitation, nocturnal enuresis. So they are very vulnerable to this situation, and the harm that's being done to them threatens to change their personality, and their outlook to this world in the future.
Okay, thank you again. We have some other questions from the YouTube streaming. Someone asked, how can we as psychologists, as professionals, can help the Palestinian people?
How can psychologists help Palestinian people?
From not being in that country, like from outside.
How can psychologists outside help Palestinian people? That's the question, right?
Yeah, how can we help from outside?
Yeah, I think, listen, that's a very important question. I think any decent citizen of the world can help by simply calling, writing to the government, by showing any kind of solidarity to Palestinians. Now, as a mental health professional, I am more interested in collaborating with mental health professionals who want to help Palestinians. One way is to help us generate knowledge from our experience. I mentioned earlier how the victorious, the powerful, writes the history, and they can falsify history in whatever way they want. You know, in order to pave the way for this genocide, Israelis said that Palestinians beheaded babies, Palestinians rape women, Palestinians are animals, Palestinians kill their own people in the hospitals. They say many lies. Now, mental health professionals are more, I expect them to be more understanding of human nature, more capable of helping people to critically think of certain situations. And I think the establishment of the mental health networks, the sister organizations to the Palestine Global Mental Health Network, to help us challenge the psychological warfare that is being launched on Palestinians is important. To document the experiences of people is very helpful. We are overworked. Palestinian mental health professionals are overworked. We do a lot of interventions in emergencies, response to crises. We do therapy. We don't have enough time to sit and reflect on what we see. Help us in writing about this experience. We testify for what's here. Help us getting this knowledge, generating this knowledge, and distributing it to academia, to conferences, and bring an anti-colonial liberation mental health approach to mainstream psychiatry and mainstream psychology.
And well, we had some more comments of support. A lot of people that admire a lot your work. And we have other question that it says, it's not a question, it's more like a doubt. Someone wants to know a little bit more about the communitarian health mental center in Gaza and West Bank, specifically how they address the collect.
I want to say here, I want to say that basically, for several years, there has been partition between the health system in the West Bank and the health system in Gaza. But I have been communicating with colleagues in Gaza and supporting the mental health system there, organizing trauma workshops, and we have a common national suicide prevention policy. We have a common mental health strategy. There is a lot of collaboration. And there is the famous Gaza mental health program, which is functional and effective in Gaza. Now everything is shut down and not working effectively during the war. But I want to say that the colleagues there are well trained to provide psychological first aid, but we need a safe place to be able to provide psychological first aid. And they are well trained to implement a program of integration of mental health in primary healthcare and in school setting. Because we have very few numbers of specialized professionals in mental health, so we trained many school counselors and some teachers, many general doctors and nurses to work effectively and provide low-intensity interventions and to identify those individuals who need more serious intervention by clinicians. So we try to push for community mental health interventions to support people with their basic needs and to support their well-being in general. And of course, there are many who also require more specialized interventions, like going to a psychiatric clinic. So the system was very good and functional in Gaza, but with these atrocities, everything is shut down and dysfunctional.
Okay, so there are no more questions. So to wrap it up, thank you a lot for your time. Really, it's really we really appreciate it, and you share some really valuable information. Everything that is happening right now is shocking. It's really horrendous. The situation is horrendous, and we hope that your voices are heard, because that is.
Thank you very much for your interest and for your making this opportunity to talk to your colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time. And the teacher Omar wants to thank you, but he couldn't assist for a medical situation, but he's really thankful.
My best wishes for Omar and recovery. I wish him a fast recovery. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, we wish the same. So thank you a lot, and we gave the contact.